The cold rain cut into her skin like a knife. A man in black emerged from the shadows, silent, without warning. A hand covered her mouth before she could breathe. Fiona Hale didn't understand what was happening. She was just an ordinary accountant, living off dry numbers and solitary dinners. Yet tonight, she was shoved into an armored vehicle like a piece of merchandise. And the man sitting opposite her, his eyes as cold as deathly stone, looked at her as if she were a returning ghost. "Welcome home, darling." His voice was chillingly calm. Fiona had never met this man before. But according to him, she was his wife, and she had just stolen $3 million from him and disappeared for 3 years. Please like and comment the city you're viewing so I know how far this story has progressed. Don't miss any part, because this is just the beginning. The rain came in sideways that night, the kind that didn't fall so much as a tack. It found the gaps between collar and skin, between breath and thought, and it stayed there like a grudge. Fiona Hale had worked 11 hours straight. Her shoes were soaked through from the walk to the parking structure, and she was thinking about nothing in particular. A cracked mug she'd left on her desk, whether the vending machine on the 3rd floor still had the peanut butter crackers she liked, when the alley behind Kersley's diner swallowed her whole. She never heard the footsteps. That was what she would remember later, in the cold hours of trying to reconstruct it. No footsteps. Just the smell of rain and then something else cutting through it. Black leather, cologne that cost more than her monthly rent, and underneath both of those things, something chemical and precise that she would eventually identify as gun oil. A hand covered her mouth. Not rough. Controlled. The kind of control that came from practice. She fought anyway. Of course she did. She clawed at the forearm, felt fabric, felt nothing give. Her heels left the ground. She tried to scream and produced nothing, her voice crushed flat under the pressure of a palm. Then the needle. And then nothing at all. She came back to consciousness in pieces. The vibration first, low, consistent, mechanical. A vehicle in motion. Then the cold air, recycled and faintly chemical. The kind that came from armored interiors with sealed windows. Then the zip ties biting into her wrists, her hands folded in her lap like she'd been arranged, like someone had taken care with the positioning. That detail scared her more than anything else. She kept her breathing shallow and let her eyes open slowly, the way she'd seen people do in movies and had never imagined she'd need to replicate. The interior of the vehicle was black leather and matte gray panels. 2 men sat on either side of her, big and silent, facing forward. A partition separated them from the driver. And across from her, in the single rear-facing seat, a man sat with his legs crossed and his jacket perfectly aligned on his shoulders, watching her with the patient attention of someone who had all the time in the world and found most of it boring. He was in his late 30s, dark hair, cut close, a face that was handsome in the way that expensive things were handsome. Precise, assembled, not warm. His suit was charcoal and it fit like it had been made for no other purpose. In one hand, he held a phone, screen dark. He wasn't using it. He was just holding it and looking at her. And when her eyes finally met his, he said nothing for a long moment. Then, "Welcome home, darling." The words landed wrong. Not threatening, almost bored. The voice of a man completing a task. Fiona's mouth was dry. Her tongue felt thick. You have the wrong person." He tilted his head a fraction. The way a man does when he hears something that doesn't interest him. "That's new?" "I'm serious. My name is Fiona Hale. I'm an accounting clerk at Meridian Financial on the 14th floor of the Kessler building. I have a lease in my name at the Corbin Apartments, Unit 4C, and I have never met you in my life." He watched her say all of this. When she finished, he uncrossed his legs and leaned forward slightly, and for the first time she saw something move behind those dead star eyes. "Fiona," he said. She nodded. He sat back again. "You were always creative, I'll give you that." She wanted to scream. She swallowed it. "Who are you?" Something shifted in his expression. Not surprise. Something closer to the particular quiet that comes before a decision. "Ronan Blackwood," he said. "Your husband." The silence after that was its own kind of violence. She shook her head. "No." 3 years of marriage, he said, conversationally, like he was reading from a document. "A ceremony at the Varenne estate in the spring. A honeymoon you chose. Lisbon, which I hated, and which you knew I would hate, which was, I suspected at the time, the point. He paused. You vanished 14 months ago with $3.2 million drawn from accounts we both had access to. I've been looking for you since February. That wasn't me. Fallon. The name landed like a stone in still water, and Fiona stopped breathing. She hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in 4 years. She had tried, with some success, to stop hearing it inside her own head. She had tried, with less success, to stop seeing the face, identical to hers in every measurable way, that went with it. My name is Fiona, she said, and her voice came out steady, which surprised her. Ronan Blackwood studied her for another moment, then looked out the tinted window at the city sliding past in the rain. We'll be at the estate in 20 minutes, he said. I'd suggest spending that time deciding which version of this you want to play. She spent the 20 minutes trying not to fall apart. The Blackwood estate was not a house. A house implied domesticity, some concession to ordinary life. This was a fortress that had agreed grudgingly to include rooms, stone walls, iron gates, cameras that tracked the vehicle from 3 angles as it rolled through the entrance. Security personnel at intervals, some in uniform and some in the expensive casual clothes that meant they were good enough not to need a uniform. Manicured grounds that were empty at this hour, lit by low amber lights that gave everything a sepia quality, like the set of something that had happened long ago to people who hadn't survived it. She was walked inside, not dragged, but with firm hands at her elbows and no option to deviate. The zip ties had been cut before they left the vehicle, which struck her as a specific kind of calculation. Visible restraints were a signal of weakness. She was escorted through a marble entry hall, past 2 staircases and a corridor full of closed doors, and deposited in a library that was roughly the size of her entire apartment. She stood in the center of it and tried to map it. Tall shelves on every wall, floor to ceiling, packed. A desk near the window, dark wood, clear surface except for a lamp and a single manila folder. 2 chairs facing a fireplace that was currently not lit. 1 door, which closed behind her. She was alone. Her wrists ached where the zip ties had been. She pressed them together, a reflexive motion, and walked to the desk first. The folder was closed. She opened it. The photograph stopped her. It was her face. Exactly her face, down to the slight asymmetry at the corner of her left eye. The faint scar at her jaw from a bicycle fall when she was 9. But the woman in the photograph was wearing something Fiona would never have chosen. A structured blazer in dark plum, hair pinned back with the kind of precision that meant time and intention. She was standing beside Ronan Blackwood at what appeared to be a formal dinner, her hand on his arm, and her expression doing something Fiona's expression had never done. It was composed. Not relaxed, composed. The difference between something natural and something performed. This woman wore her own face like a weapon. The name on the tab of the folder read, Fallon Hale Blackwood. Fiona sat down slowly. She had last seen her twin sister at their mother's funeral 4 years ago. Fallon had arrived late, left early, and said almost nothing to Fiona during the reception except, at the end, in the hallway near the coat closet. I'm not coming back. Don't look for me. Then she had left with a man Fiona didn't recognize and hadn't been seen since, and apparently she had not simply disappeared. She had gone and built an entire life, a criminal life, inside the empire of a man who was now holding Fiona inside his library and calling her darling. She went through the rest of the folder with hands that were steady only because she was concentrating on keeping them that way. Fallon's file was extensive. Financial records, meeting transcripts, photographs at events Fiona had never attended with people she had never met. Operational notes with her twin's name on them, decisions attributed to her, a reputation built across 3 years that read like the biography of someone Fiona didn't recognize and couldn't have imagined. Fallon had not just been Ronan Blackwood's wife. She had been something closer to his operational counterweight, handling negotiation, internal discipline, and the kind of financial structure that left no clean traces. She had been trusted at a level that, in this world, Fiona understood intuitively meant something beyond access. It meant complicity. It meant shared consequence. And Fallon had walked out with $3 million and left a ghost in her place. The door opened. Ronan Blackwood came in without announcing himself, which told her something about how he thought of the space. He walked to the fireplace and stood with his back to her, hands clasped behind him, and for a moment neither of them spoke. "The file," she finally said. "You left it out." "I know. So you wanted me to read it." He turned. "I wanted to see what you did when you read it." She held his gaze. "And?" "You didn't run. You didn't try the window." He tilted his head slightly. "You sat down and went through it systematically." "I'm a bookkeeper. I go through documents. That's what I do." "Is it?" Not a question. She stood up. It seemed important to be standing for this part. "Mr. Blackwood, I understand that from where you're sitting, I look exactly like your wife. I understand that you have reasons, financial, personal, to believe I'm lying to you right now. I am not lying to you. I have never met you. I have never been inside this building. My sister and I have been estranged for 4 years, and I don't know what she told you or what she built here, but I am not her, and whatever she ran from it alone." He let her finish. He had that quality. He listened completely, which was more unsettling than interrupting would have been. "Your sister," he repeated. "My twin, Fallon. We're identical. She's 31. I'm 31. We grew up in Westfield. Our mother died 4 years ago. Those are the facts." "And the scar," he said, and took 2 steps toward her. She held her ground. He raised one hand and pointed, not touching, just indicating, the left side of her jaw. "You've had it since you were 9. Bicycle." The cold that moved through her was something different from fear. "She told you about that?" "She told me a great many things." "Then she told you she had a twin." "She told me she had no family." Fiona laughed. It came out thin and strange, not really a laugh at all. "Of course she did." He was close enough now that she could see the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, the place where the practiced detachment didn't reach all the way down. He was not a man who was shocked easily. He was, she thought, a man who had built an entire architecture to prevent being shocked, and something about the last few minutes had found a crack in it. "There will need to be tests," he said. "What kind of tests?" "The kind that determine whether you're a grieving stranger or the most elaborate performance I've ever watched." He studied her face with the clinical attention of someone appraising a document for forgery. "Either way, you're not leaving." She absorbed that. "Because if I'm Fallon, you want your money." "Yes." "And if I'm not Fallon, then you're still the only person in the world who can tell me where she is." He stepped back, creating distance that felt almost deliberate. "You'll be in the East Wing, comfortable enough, constrained." He moved toward the door. "I'd eat something if I were you. Tomorrow is going to require your full attention." "What's tomorrow?" He paused at the threshold without turning. "You'll meet the people Fallon worked with, and they're going to expect her." The door closed. Fiona stood in the library with her heart hammering and Fallon's face looking up at her from the photograph on the desk, and she understood with sudden, concrete clarity what was actually happening. Not just that she had been taken, not just that she was trapped inside her sister's disappearance. She was being asked, without anyone framing it as a question, to become a woman she had never been, to step into a life built on calculation and fear and sustained cruelty, wearing her own face like a mask. If she refused, she was useless. And useless things in this world she already understood got discarded. If she agreed, if she tried, she would have to convince a room full of people who already knew Fallon Hale Blackwood, who had watched her work and feared her and measured themselves against her, that the woman standing in front of them was exactly who they expected. The food came an hour later, real food, brought by a woman who made no eye contact and left without a word. Fiona ate mechanically, then pulled the folder back across the desk and started from the beginning. If she was going to survive this, she needed to understand what she was becoming. She read until the lamp was the only light left in the building. At 2 a.m, a knock at the door. One knock, quiet. And then a voice through the wood. "Tomorrow, 8 sharp. Don't be soft." She didn't know who it was. It didn't matter. She turned the next page. The photographs in section 4 were the ones that changed something in her chest. Not fear, not grief, but something heavier. Conference tables and waterfront warehouses and men in expensive rooms, making decisions that ended careers and sometimes lives. And in every photograph, Fallon, her face a mirror of Fiona's own, standing at the center of it, comfortable, fluent, at home. Fiona pressed one palm flat against the page, felt the paper, the grain of it, the physical reality of the document in her hands. Her sister had not just married into this world. She had built a throne in it, and then she had burned it down and run, leaving Fiona to stand in the ashes wearing her crown. When morning came gray and cold through the window, Fiona closed the folder and set it back exactly where she'd found it. She went to the small bathroom attached to the room, splashed cold water on her face, and looked at herself in the mirror for a long time. Her own face looked back. The same face that was in every photograph in that folder. The same scar, the same asymmetry, the same dark eyes. She practiced the expression she'd seen in the photographs. Controlled, composed. The face of a woman who had decided something and did not doubt the decision. It took her 40 minutes to find it. By the time the knock came at 8, she had it down. She opened the door. A man she hadn't seen before stood in the corridor, mid-40s, thick through the shoulders, a face that had absorbed considerable damage and was unbothered by the fact. He looked at her with the specific attention of someone assessing a problem. "Morning," he said, and there was something testing in the word. Fiona met his eyes and said nothing. Fallon, she had noted in 3 separate transcripts, almost never spoke first. After a beat, the man nodded slightly, the particular nod of someone who has received an expected answer. "Meeting in 10, he said. "Full table." He turned and walked. Fiona followed. The corridor stretched ahead of her, clean and cold and lit by light that felt institutional in its evenness. At the end of it, behind a set of double doors, she could hear the low register sound of men talking. The particular register of professionals settling in, getting ready. Fiona walked toward it and kept her breathing even and thought about everything she'd read and tried not to think about what happened to people in this world who were discovered to be something other than what they claimed. She pushed through the doors. 11 faces turned toward her, and then the room went quiet in a way that felt like a held breath, waiting for the first word, the first gesture, the thing that would tell them who she was. Fiona stood in the doorway and let the silence sit. Let it build. Let them wonder. Because Fallon Hale Blackwood, she had learned from 3 years of documented behavior, never filled a silence that was working in her favor. Across the table, at the far end, Ronan Blackwood watched her with those dead star eyes. And for the first time since the alley and the needle and the cold interior of the armored car, Fiona felt something shift inside her chest. Not calm, not confidence, but something that was trying to become both of those things in real time, under pressure, with no rehearsal and no net. She pulled out the chair at the near end of the table and sat down. "Let's start," she said. The voice came out wrong, too even, too neutral, but not wrong enough that anyone said anything. And in that single undetected mistake, Fiona Hale understood that she was no longer standing at the edge of something she could refuse. She had already stepped off it. The only question now was how far down this went, and whether she would still be herself when she reached the bottom. The room smelled like burnt coffee and money, and the particular kind of tension that lives in spaces where men regularly decide things that cannot be undecided. 11 faces. She had counted them from the doorway, a habit she hadn't known she had until this moment. A new instinct grafted onto her overnight, borrowed from a woman she had spent 6 hours studying by lamplight. She sat at the near end of the table and looked at none of them directly, which was a choice, which was the first choice she had made in this room, and she felt the weight of it like a physical thing pressing between her shoulder blades. Ronan was at the far end, and he said nothing. That was its own kind of message. The man who had walked her down the corridor, she had clocked the name Drev in one of Fallon's files. Head of internal security, reliable but difficult, sat 2 seats to the left of Ronan and was already watching her with the concentrated attention of someone waiting for a discrepancy. To her immediate right, a woman she hadn't been expecting, late 40s, silver-streaked hair cut to the jaw, reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. She had a yellow legal pad in front of her and a pen she kept clicking in a slow, patient rhythm. Her name, Fiona had learned from the files, was Carla Voss. She managed the empire's financial architecture. the same financial architecture that Fallon had hollowed out when she left. Carla Voss had reasons to want Fallon dead. That much had been clear even in the sanitized language of the documents. Port 7 clearances, said a man across the table without preamble. Heavy set, 60s, the kind of sunburn that came from actual outdoor work, rather than vacation. We've been sitting on 4 containers since the 16th. Every day that cargo sits is a day the dock supervisors get nervous, and nervous dock supervisors talk. Fiona folded her hands on the table. In Fallon's files, Port 7 came up 14 times. She had not had time to read all 14. She had read 6. Then move them, she said. We can't move them without a clearance signature. So get one. The man's jaw tightened. The original clearance route went through Maddox. Maddox is in federal custody since Tuesday. Fiona absorbed that, said nothing. We need a new channel, the man continued, and we needed it 4 days ago. She looked at Carla Voss because Fallon's files indicated that Carla was the person who built channels, even if she would deny it in any room that wasn't this one. Carla met her eyes. The pen stopped clicking. There's an option through the Hendricks Group, Carla said carefully. It's expensive. How expensive? Fiona said. Enough that I'd want a conversation about it first. Privately. The last word landed with a particular weight that was aimed specifically at Fiona, and the aim was not friendly. Fiona held Carla's gaze for a beat longer than was comfortable. Schedule it, she said. Carla's expression did not change. The pen started clicking again. The meeting moved forward. Fiona listened more than she spoke, which was defensible. Fallon had been gone for over a year, and a returning person could reasonably be getting up to speed. She asked 2 questions in 40 minutes, both of them tactical, both short, and both derived directly from things she had read in the file. Neither provoked a visible reaction, but Drev was still watching her. He hadn't stopped once. When the meeting broke, people filed out in the low murmur of men continuing conversations they'd started before she arrived. Fiona stood, straightened her jacket. She had found a set of Fallon's clothes in the East Wing room, and the blazer fit her exactly, which was its own kind of horror, and was moving toward the door when Drev stepped into her path. Not aggressive, just present. You were quiet, he said. I'm always quiet when I'm thinking. Since when? She looked at him. He was taller than her by 6 inches and outweighed her by a significant margin, and none of that was the actual source of threat. The actual source of threat was the fact that he had known Fallon Hale Blackwood for 3 years and was very carefully measuring every syllable she produced against a template she couldn't fully access. Since I've been gone 14 months and I'd rather know what's changed than talk over it, she said. He studied her. That's almost what she would have said. What's the difference? She wouldn't have explained it. He let a beat pass. She would have just looked at me until I moved. Fiona held his gaze, said nothing, waited. After 4 seconds, Drev moved. She walked out with her spine straight and her hands loose at her sides and didn't allow herself to exhale until she had turned a corner and put 12 feet of corridor between herself and the room. Carla Voss found her at the East Wing staircase. She appeared with the suddenness of someone who had been waiting at a calculated intercept point, and Fiona filed that detail away. Now, Carla said. Unless you're busy. Now's fine. They went to Carla's office, a small, window-facing room near the back of the 2nd floor. Nothing like Ronan's library in scale, but ordered with the particular intensity of someone who did not tolerate confusion in their physical space. Binders, labeled folders, a whiteboard with columns that had been wiped but not well enough, faint remnants of numbers visible in the smear. Carla closed the door, did not offer a chair. You look the same, Carla said. I know. You don't sound the same. Fiona kept her face neutral. People change. In 14 months. In a lot less than that, if the circumstances push it. Carla walked to her desk and sat, and the act of sitting seemed to formalize something. She picked up a single sheet of paper, looked at it, set it down. The Hendricks route will cost $80,000 above standard clearance. That comes out of the discretionary account, which currently has... She paused, and it was not an accidental pause. Significantly less in it than it did when you left. I know. Do you? Carla. Don't. The word was quiet and flat and final. Don't do the thing where you say my name like that and expect it to land the same way it used to. I've had 14 months to think about what you did, about what you took. And I have had... Her voice compressed slightly, the closest thing to visible emotion Fiona had seen from her, exactly enough of being patient about it. Fiona sat down. Not because she had been invited to, because she needed to be at eye level for this, and standing while Carla built pressure was a losing position. Say what you need to say, Fiona said. You burned me, Carla said. Not just the accounts. You burned my reputation inside this organization. You burned the 2 years I spent building the Maddox clearance channel. You burned the Verona deal, which would have set us up for the next 5 years, because you used the Verona contacts to move money out, and now Verona won't take our calls. Her voice was controlled and even and absolutely lethal. I have spent 14 months cleaning up the damage you did on your way out the door. So when you walk in here and sit at that table like nothing happened, and you speak to me like I work for you, I need you to understand what I am holding back from saying to you, and why, and to know that my reasons for holding it back are entirely practical. She folded her hands on the desk. Because you are still Ronan's wife, she said, and I have survived 11 years in this organization by being practical. Fiona let the silence breathe. She was thinking very quickly and trying not to let it show on her face. The Hendricks route, she said finally. Carla blinked. Just once. Approve it, Fiona said, and pull whatever you need from the discretionary account. I'll sign off. A pause. That's it? For now. Carla looked at her for a long moment with the searching attention of someone trying to read a text in a language they almost knew. You're not going to explain yourself. No. You're not going to apologize. Would it help if I did? Carla's mouth tightened. No. Then no. Carla pulled the paper toward her and made a notation. The meeting was over, or at least that portion of it. Fiona stood. One more thing, Carla said, not looking up. Fiona waited. Drev ran a physical comparison this morning, fingerprints from the East Wing room against what we have on file. She made another notation. They matched. The cold came back. Of course they did, Fiona said. Carla set her pen down. Identical twins have identical fingerprints, though. Did you know that? The silence between them was different now, finer, more careful. Is that a question? Fiona said. Not yet, Carla said, but it might become one. Fiona left the room and walked to the East Wing and sat on the edge of the bed and pressed both hands against her face and breathed. Just breathed. She gave herself 60 seconds of it. The shaking in her hands, the cold at the base of her throat, the way her pulse was doing something that didn't feel sustainable. 60 seconds, and then she stopped. She had survived the morning. That was the fact. That was the only fact that mattered right now. She pulled Fallon's folder back out from where she'd tucked it under the mattress and opened it to Section 8, which she hadn't reached the night before. The section was labeled simply Operations, External. It was longer than the others. She started reading. Ronan came to find her at noon. He knocked, which surprised her, and waited for her to say, "Come in," which surprised her more. He entered the room and looked at her on the bed with the folder spread across her lap and said nothing for a moment. "How was the meeting?" he said. "Fine." "Carla?" "Also fine." She was professional, Fiona said. "She's angry. She has reason to be angry. She was professional about it." He moved to the chair near the window, the only chair in the room, and sat without asking. He had that quality, ownership of space that never announced itself. Drev flagged the fingerprints. "I know, Carla told me." "And?" "And identical twins have identical fingerprints." She looked up from the folder. "You already knew that." "Yes." "So the fingerprints don't tell you anything?" "No," he said. "They don't." He leaned forward slightly, elbows on knees. "But you handled Drev this morning." She didn't ask how he knew that. "He moved." "He never moved for her on the first try." "Then maybe I'm better at it than she was." Something moved in Ronan's eyes. Not quite amusement, not quite its opposite. "Or you've had time to study how to do it." Or that, she agreed. The honesty seemed to wrong-foot him slightly. He had been expecting deflection, she thought. Fallon probably deflected. Fallon probably reframed everything so that the original question became irrelevant before it was answered. Fiona didn't have the architecture for that yet. She was working with what she had. "There's a situation at the waterfront tonight," he said. "A union representative has been skimming from 2 of the shipping accounts. Small amounts, patient amounts. He's been doing it for 8 months, and he thought it was invisible." It wasn't. No. Ronan looked at her steadily. "It needs to be addressed tonight. Publicly enough that it doesn't invite repetition. Quietly enough that it doesn't invite outside attention." He paused. Fallon handled all union matters directly. There it was. Fiona closed the folder. "What time?" 9, Pier 11. "Who'll be there?" "Decker, who runs the longshoreman contracts. 3 of his people, myself." He paused. "And you?" She looked at him. He looked at her. The room was very quiet, and the thing between them was not trust. Trust was not in the vocabulary of the situation. Not yet, maybe not ever. But something that was at least in the same family as it. Something provisional, something that could turn in either direction without much warning. "All right," she said. He stood. At the door he stopped. "You've been in that file for 16 hours. "I know." "Did you find what you were looking for?" She thought about it honestly. "I found what I need for tonight." He nodded once and left. She spent the afternoon on sections 9 through 12. She ate when food came. She didn't sleep. At 8:30 she dressed in Fallon's clothes, dark, fitted, functional, and stood at the mirror and did the expression again. Controlled, composed, decided. It came faster now. That was the frightening part. It was becoming easier. Pier 11 at night was exactly what the name implied, and nothing more. Concrete, salt air, the low groan of cables under tension. A single light source above a service entrance cast everything in harsh white. 4 cars were parked in a loose cluster. Men stood in the spaces between them in the particular formation that meant they were trying to look like they weren't standing guard while absolutely standing guard. Fiona walked from Ronan's car to the service entrance with the collar of her jacket up and her hands steady, and each step placed with the deliberate weight of someone who belonged there. The interior was a warehouse space cleared for purpose. Crates moved back, folding tables set up in the center. 4 men around it who all looked at her when she came in, the way men look at something they've been told to expect but don't fully believe in. Decker was at the table. She had a photograph of him from the file, early 60s, Irish features, the particular build of a man who had done physical work for decades and resented having moved to management. He wore the resentment in his jaw and his shoulders, and the way he stood with his weight shifted back, like he was always about to leave. Behind her, Ronan, just inside the door, arms crossed, saying nothing. She was on her own. She sat down across from Decker and put nothing on the table and said nothing and looked at him with the expression she had been practicing, and let the silence build until she felt it in her chest. Decker broke it. "Good to see you back," he said, in a voice that meant the opposite. "I'm sure," she said. He shifted. "Look, whatever Carla's been telling you, I haven't talked to Carla about this." "Then I have the accounts, Decker." She kept her voice flat. 8 months of them. You were smart about it. Amount small enough to fall under the automated threshold, spread across 3 accounts, no obvious pattern. She paused. Except the pattern was the absence of one, which is itself a pattern if you look long enough. His face had gone through 3 separate expressions in 6 seconds. She clocked all of them. "How much?" she said. A long moment. "Decker." 42, he said, quietly. 1,000. "Over 8 months." "Yes." She nodded slowly, which she had observed in Fallon's video files as one of her twin's most effective tools. The nod that could mean agreement or condemnation and never specified which. "Here's what's going to happen," she said. "You're going to return it, all of it, plus 8%, which is what that money would have generated in the time you had it. You're going to do that by end of business Friday." She leaned forward slightly. And you're going to resign the longshoreman contract effective next quarter, citing personal reasons. Your pension is intact. Your men keep their positions under new supervision. You walk out of this cleanly." Decker stared at her. "That's it?" "That's it." He blinked. He had been prepared for something worse. She could see it in the relaxation that moved through him, the way his shoulders dropped a half-inch. She let him have the relief for exactly 3 seconds. "If the money isn't in the account by Friday," she said, "I revisit everything. The contract going back 5 years, not 8 months. And I do it in front of people who have less patience for this conversation than I do." She held his gaze. "We won't meet again after tonight unless I initiate it. Are we clear?" "We're clear." She stood. "Go home, Decker." He went. She stood at the table as the room emptied and listened to the sound of engines starting outside and felt the particular exhaustion that comes not from physical effort, but from sustained precision. From being something you aren't for hours on end without breaking the surface. Ronan came to stand beside her. For a moment he said nothing, just looked at the empty chairs and the single lamp and the salt-stained concrete floor. "No blood," he said. "No." "Fallon would have made an example." "Fallon isn't here," she said. The words came out before she could adjust them, more edge in them than she intended. Ronan turned to look at her. "I handled it," she said. "It worked." "It did," he agreed. And something in his voice had shifted, some register she hadn't heard from him before. Not softer exactly, but less defended, less behind glass. She was too tired to know how to feel about that. They drove back to the estate in separate cars, which she was grateful for. She needed the 20 minutes of darkness and motion and silence to find her way back to herself. Or to whatever was passing for herself at this point. In the East Wing room, she took off Fallon's jacket and sat down and noticed for the first time that her hands were not shaking. At some point during the evening, they had stopped. She wasn't sure when. She wasn't sure what that meant. She went to the small desk, turned on the lamp, and opened the folder to a section she had skipped, the personal correspondence files, the things Fallon had written and received that were too human to be operational documents, but had been collected anyway by someone with the thoroughness of a person building a case. In the third envelope, between a receipt and a hotel card, she found a photograph she hadn't seen in the initial scan. 2 girls. Identical. Maybe 12 years old, standing in front of a house she recognized. The house on Millward Street, the one they'd grown up in. They were squinting into summer sun, and one of them had her arm around the other, and they were both grinning with the complete unself-consciousness of people who don't yet know what's coming. On the back, in handwriting she knew as well as her own, because it was her own, differentiated only by 4 years of divergent muscle memory. 6 words. Just in case you forget us. Fiona turned the photograph over and looked at their identical faces for a long time. Then she set it face down on the desk and closed the folder and went to the window and stood there with her arms wrapped around herself, looking at the grounds of the Blackwood estate in the dark, the amber lights and the iron gates, and the cameras she could see and the ones she couldn't. And it occurred to her, slowly, the way realizations come when you're too exhausted to hurry them, that she was not going to be able to outrun this. The longer she performed Fallon, the more Fallon she became. The more she succeeded at being her twin, the more valuable she became to Ronan. The more valuable she became, the more impossible it was to explain the truth to anyone who might have the power to help her. She was building her own cage, and she was very good at it, which was the cruelest part. A soft sound from outside the door. Not a knock, just the presence of someone in the corridor, a weight shift, the kind of sound that came from someone who had stopped and was listening. She went to the door and opened it. No one. But on the floor, just outside the threshold, a small object. She crouched down and picked it up. A hair clip. Butterfly-shaped pale blue enamel, the paint worn at one wing where it had been dropped once, and the hair clip sat in her palm like a small, cold fact. Pale blue enamel, butterfly-shaped. The paint worn at the left wing where it had been dropped on tile. She remembered the sound of it, the specific crack of enamel on bathroom floor, because she had been the one to drop it. She had been 11 years old, and Fallon had picked it up and kept it, and Fiona had forgotten about it until this exact moment, when it materialized outside her door in a building that was supposed to be a fortress, At 2 in the morning, placed there by hands that should not have been able to reach this corridor. She stood in the doorway and looked at both ends of the hall. Empty. The amber light from the sconces made everything the color of old photographs. She listened. The hum of the building's ventilation, the distant sound of a gate mechanism, nothing else. She crouched down and looked at the floor. Carpet, thick enough to swallow footsteps whole. No marks, no sign of direction. She went back inside and locked the door and sat on the bed with the clip in both hands and stared at it. Fallon had kept it for 20 years, and now she had returned it. The message was not complicated. The message was, I was here. I can get here. You are not as safe as you think you are, and neither is he. And I am watching all of it. Fiona put the clip in the inner pocket of the jacket she'd hung on the chair. Then she lay down on the bed with her boots still on and her eyes open and did not sleep for the rest of the night. By 6 in the morning, she had made a decision, not a comfortable one. There was no version of any decision available to her that was comfortable, but a functional one. She could not tell Ronan about the clip. Not yet. Telling him meant confirming that Fallon was close, which meant Ronan would accelerate whatever he was planning, which meant Fiona would lose what little room she had to maneuver. She needed to understand what Fallon wanted before she handed that information to a man who would use it in ways she couldn't predict or control. She put the folder away and washed her face and went downstairs before anyone came to find her. Drev was in the kitchen. He was the kind of man who was always somewhere useful before anyone else arrived, which meant he either didn't sleep or slept in intervals so short they barely counted. He was drinking coffee at the counter and reading something on a tablet, and he looked up when she came in with the same measuring attention he had given her every time their eyes met. She poured coffee without asking where anything was, because she had found the kitchen layout in a set of household notes in Fallon's files, which was either brilliant preparation on her part or evidence of how completely unhinged her current situation was. Both, probably. Early, Drev said. Couldn't sleep. That's new too. She looked at him over the rim of the cup. You keep a list? I keep everything. He set the tablet down. You handled Decker well last night. She said nothing. The way you structured it, the resignation, the pension intact, no public consequence, that's not how she used to work. People adjust their methods. Sure. He picked up the tablet again, but he wasn't reading it. Fallon used to say that visible consequence was the only consequence that mattered, that anything you did quietly was only half done. Fallon also disappeared with $3 million and left the organization to hold the damage, Fiona said, so maybe her methods weren't perfect. A beat. Drev put the tablet face down on the counter. That's the first time you've referred to yourself in the third person. The air in the room changed. Fiona kept her face exactly where it was. She took another sip of coffee, set the cup down with the same deliberate steadiness she had been practicing for 2 days. The steadiness of a woman who did not make unintended statements, and said, It's the first morning I've been rested enough to have any perspective. Drev looked at her for a long moment. His face was not readable in the conventional sense. It was too still for that, too practiced. But something behind it was running calculations she wasn't authorized to see. Ronan wants you in the East study at 8, he said. Something came in overnight. He picked up his tablet and left. Fiona stood at the counter and finished her coffee and did not allow herself to catalog the ways that conversation could have gone worse. There was no productive version of that exercise. She rinsed the cup, set it in the rack, and went upstairs to put on Fallon's clothes again. The East study was smaller than the library. A working room, not an impressionist one. Maps on one wall, a monitor on the desk, a second screen folded open on a side table. Ronan was standing in front of the wall map when she arrived, and he had the look of a man who had received information that rearranged something he thought was settled. Carla was there too, seated, legal pad open, pen moving. The monitor showed a port layout, aerial, timestamp from 2 nights ago. Pier 7, Ronan said, without turning. Container 3 of the 4 that have been sitting since the 16th. He turned. It was accessed 2 nights ago, between 2 and 3 in the morning. The lock was replaced with an identical unit so the scan didn't flag it. We only found it because one of the dock supervisors noticed the hinge alignment was off. What was taken? Fiona said. Nothing, Carla said. That's the part. Nothing was taken, but something was left. Ronan moved to the side table and turned the second screen toward her. A photograph. Interior of a shipping container, low light, the kind of image that came from a phone held quickly. In the center of the concrete floor, arranged with the deliberateness of a statement, a single document, unfolded, weighted at the corners with 4 identical coins. She knew the document. She had seen it in Section 11 of Fallon's files. A financial transfer record, the kind that showed the origin and destination of funds through 3 layers of shell company. It was one of the documents Fiona had read at 2 a.m. and had understood to be evidence of something significant without having context for what. Now she had the context. That document, Carla said carefully, should not exist anywhere outside this building. The original is in the secured archive. There are no copies because Fallon, she stopped, recalibrated, continued, because the person who created the record took specific steps to ensure it was singular. Fiona looked at the photograph. But there it is. But there it is. Carla's pen had stopped moving. Which means whoever placed it there has had access to our secured archive at some point and is now telling us they have the document and know what it means and are choosing to surface it in a location we use for active operations. The room was very quiet. Fiona looked at the coins in the photograph. 4 of them, identical, placed at the corners. She had seen those coins before. Not in the file, but in her memory, which was where the important things lived regardless of whether she wanted them to. A kitchen table on Millward Street, 2 girls playing a card game, and Fallon lining up 4 quarters at the corners of the table before every hand because she said it made the space official. It meant something was at stake. A tell, a signature, something no one in this room would recognize, except her. She kept her face still. When did you find this? 3 hours ago, Ronan said. The dock supervisor called Drev at 4. And you're certain nothing was removed from the container? Inventory is ongoing, but the initial count is clean. She nodded. The nodding had become automatic in a way that she noted and did not examine too closely. Who else knows about this? The 4 people in this room, Ronan said, and Drev. Keep it that way. The instruction came out of her with the assurance of something she'd said 100 times, and she saw Carla register it, the fluency of it, the lack of hesitation, and file it somewhere. Ronan studied her. Ideas. She chose the next words carefully. Someone who wants us destabilized but doesn't want open conflict. They're not taking anything. They're placing things. That's a psychological operation, not a material one. They want us to spend resources looking inward, checking who had archive access, questioning internal loyalty. She paused. The goal is the time and energy we spend being afraid of ourselves. And the document specifically, Carla said, is a reminder of something they know, not a threat to reveal it. If they were going to reveal it, they would have. They're holding it. They want us to know they're holding it. She looked at Ronan. Someone who understands exactly how this organization thinks. Ronan was watching her with an expression she had not seen on him before. Not suspicion, something more complicated than that. The look of a man recalibrating. Yes, he said quietly. She had told him nothing he didn't already know, but the shape of how she'd said it, the sequence, the specific emphasis, that had told him something else. She needed to get out of this room. I want to see the full archive access log, she said. Who pulled what, when, going back 18 months? That'll take time to compile, Carla said. Then start now. She looked at Ronan. I'll be in the East Wing. She left before either of them said anything else. In the corridor, she walked with the same measured pace she had been practicing, the one that communicated purpose rather than flight, and her mind was running at a speed she could feel behind her eyes like pressure. She got to the East Wing staircase and went up and into the room and sat on the floor with her back against the bed, because the chair felt too formal for what she needed right now, which was to think in the posture of someone who had given up on pretending this was a normal situation. Fallon had been in that container, or someone working for Fallon. But no, the coins. The coins were Fallon's, and no one else would know that, and no one else would use them because the whole point was that Fiona would see the photograph and know, in a way no one in that room could intercept. Fallon was not just watching, Fallon was talking. To her specifically. Through the photograph, through the coin placement, through the hair clip on the threshold, and through the document she had left there, a document that Fiona had read at 2 a.m. and had partially understood, she was also saying, I have leverage, and you're sitting inside it. Fiona pulled the hair clip from her jacket pocket and held it in her palm again. Just in case you forget us. She put the clip back, stood up, went to the desk and opened the folder to section 11, the financial transfer records, and read them again with the complete attention of someone who now understood what she was looking for. It took her an hour. At the end of the hour, she sat back and looked at the wall and understood, with the particular cold clarity that comes from having a thing you suspected become a thing you knew, that Fallon had not simply stolen from Ronan Blackwood. She had stolen with him. The transfer records documented a systematic diversion of funds, not from Ronan's accounts, but through them, using the organizational structure as a conduit. The design of it was sophisticated enough that it could read, to the wrong eye, as Ronan himself moving money. Fallon had built a financial architecture that was simultaneously a theft and a frame. She had taken the money and left a trail that pointed at her husband, and she had left a copy of that trail in a location that Ronan's organization would find. If Fiona told Ronan what she'd found, the coins, the clip, the message, she would need to show him the Section 11 records. And when she did, Ronan would see what Fallon had built, the transfer design, the way it pointed, at him. And that would not go well. But if she said nothing, Fallon controlled the pace. Fallon would keep surfacing things, keep placing documents in containers, keep leaving clips on thresholds, keep tightening the architecture of her plan until the organization tore itself apart trying to find the source of the breach, or until Ronan found the records some other way and came to her with questions she couldn't answer cleanly. She was standing in the center of two kinds of destruction, and neither of them had an exit she could see. She put Section 11 face down on the desk. Then she picked it back up. She looked at the transfer records again, not at the content this time, but at the structure. The way the shell companies were layered, the way the timing was sequenced, the specific interval between withdrawals. It was elegant. She could admit that, even now. The architecture was elegant in the way that a very good trap was elegant. It looked like something else until you were already inside it. Fiona had spent 11 years reading financial documents. She had spent 11 years looking at numbers and finding the places where they didn't line up, the invisible seams and structures that were designed to hide them. It was the least glamorous skill in the world. It had never mattered before. It mattered now. Because she could see something in the transfer records that she suspected Fallon did not know she would look for. A sequencing irregularity in the third layer of the conduit, small, the kind of thing that only existed because the person who built the structure had prioritized concealment over technical perfection. A footprint. Not Ronan's. Not Fallon's. A third party who had touched the money at the moment of diversion. Someone else had been in this architecture. Someone Fallon had used. Or someone who had used Fallon. She was still staring at the records when the knock came. Not soft this time. 3 deliberate strikes. She flipped the folder closed. Come in. Drev opened the door. He did not come in. He stood at the threshold with his hands loose at his sides and his face doing the thing it did when he had received information that changed the shape of something he'd been working on. We need you downstairs, he said. What happened? The archive log came back. He paused. The last person to access the financial records in Section 11 of Fallon's file. He looked at her with eyes that had made a decision about something. It was 2 nights ago, from a terminal in this wing. The silence lasted exactly long enough to mean something. This room, she said, the terminal in the corridor outside it. He held her gaze. Which requires a biometric pass to operate, registered to one user. She understood what he was saying. Someone set this up, she said. That's one possibility. Drev. Ronan's waiting, he said, and stepped back from the door. She followed him down 2 flights of stairs and through the main corridor and into the east study, where Ronan was standing at the window with his back to the room, and Carla was at the desk with her hands folded on top of the legal pad, the pen set aside, which meant the note-taking portion of the morning was over and something else had begun. Ronan turned when she came in. He did not look like a man who had been surprised. He looked like a man who had arrived at the end of a calculation he had been running for days and found the result both expected and unwelcome. "Sit down," he said. She sat. "The terminal log," he said. "The access. The document in the container." He moved away from the window. "And Pier 11 last night, the Decker resolution, which was handled in a way that is specifically inconsistent with how Fallon Hale has operated in the 4 years I have known her." He stopped in front of the desk, not sitting, looking down at her with an expression that had compressed into something very focused and very cold. "I have been patient with the inconsistencies because some of them worked in my favor, and because I wanted to see where they led." She said nothing. "I need you to tell me," he said, "who accessed that terminal." "I didn't." "Then who did?" "Someone who could reach this building, who knew exactly which file to access and where to leave the document and how to use the biometric corridor without triggering a secondary alert." She leaned forward. "Someone who has been inside this building before and knows its systems well enough to move through them in the dark." Ronan was very still. "Your wife," she said. "Your actual wife. The one you're still looking for." She could hear the ventilation in the walls and the distant sound of the gate and Carla's controlled breathing and nothing else. "You're telling me Fallon was in this building," Ronan said. "I'm telling you she's been outside this building since before your people found me. I'm telling you she left something on my threshold the first night." She reached into her jacket and set the butterfly clip on the desk between them. "I'm telling you she's been running this from the beginning, not reacting, running it. And I think she's been in contact with someone inside this organization who is feeding her information because there is no other explanation for how precisely she's moving." The clip sat on the desk, small and pale and worn at one wing. Ronan looked at it for a long time. Then he looked at her. "You held this back," he said. Quiet. The dangerous kind of quiet. "Yes." "Why?" She looked at him directly. "Because if I told you immediately, you'd have locked down the building and started pulling people apart looking for the leak. And Fallon would have seen that reaction and adjusted. She's good at reading reactions. She was married to you for 3 years. She paused. "I needed to understand what she was doing before I handed you a tool you'd use wrong." Something moved across Ronan's face. Not anger, or not only anger, something beneath it. "That," he said, "is the most honest thing anyone has said to me in this building in 3 years." He picked up the clip and looked at it, set it back down. "She planned this," he said. "It was not a question. All of it, including my abduction. She knew your people would find whoever looked like her." Fiona's voice came out level. She had worked to make it level. "She needed a decoy inside the estate, someone who would be convincing enough to keep you occupied while she positioned herself outside." She let that land. "I wasn't taken by accident. I was placed." Carla made a sound, not a word, just the involuntary exhale of someone who has understood something unpleasant. Ronan set both hands flat on the desk, looked at the surface, looked up. "She used you." "She used both of us," Fiona said, and the anger in her own voice surprised her, the rawness of it, breaking through the controlled surface for the first time in 3 days. "She used you to find me. She used me to distract you." She's been outside this building, somewhere, watching this play out, and every day we spend inside reacting to what she leaves for us is a day she uses to move money, move people, move whatever she's building into position. She stopped, caught the edge of her own voice, and pulled it back. Ronan was looking at her with an expression she couldn't name and didn't try to. "The transfer records," she said. "Section 11. I need you to look at them with me. There's something in the architecture she didn't intend to leave." She held his eyes. "A third party. Someone who touched the money at the point of diversion. I don't think she was working alone." The room was quiet for a long moment. Then Ronan straightened, looked at Drev at the door, at Carla, back at her. "Clear the building," he said to Drev. "Skeleton crew, people we've had since before Fallon arrived." He looked at Carla. "Pull Section 11 from the archive and bring it here." Then he looked at Fiona one more time with those dead star eyes that had something new behind them now. Not warmth, not trust, but the specific quality of a man who had decided to make a bet on something he couldn't fully verify. "Show me what you found." Fiona pulled the folder open. Outside, the first gray light of a new morning was pressing against the windows of the estate, and somewhere beyond the iron gates and the cameras and the amber-lit perimeter, in a city that didn't know any of this was happening, Fallon Hale was watching the same dawn, and Fiona spread Section 11 across the desk. 6 pages. She had arranged them in the order that made the architecture visible. Not chronological, but structural, the way an accountant read a document rather than the way a civilian did. Ronan stood at her left shoulder, and Carla sat across the desk, and neither of them spoke while she oriented herself, her index finger moving across the transfer columns without touching the paper. "Here," she said. "Third layer. The Alden Group conduit." Carla leaned forward. "That's a standard shell. We've used it for 4 years. The outgoing transfers through Alden are standard. The timing is standard. But look at the interval." She pointed to a column of timestamps. "Every transfer in this sequence occurs 48 hours after the corresponding inflow. Every one consistent, going back 9 months. She moved her finger to the right. Except these 3. In February, March, and April, the interval drops to 31 hours. Carla was quiet. 17 hours isn't noise, Fiona said. In a structure this deliberately paced, 17 hours is a signal. Someone was pulling the money through faster than the established rhythm. Someone who needed it to move before a window closed. "A window," Ronan said. "A regulatory window. Or a surveillance window. Someone who knew the monitoring schedule well enough to know they had 31 hours and not 48. She looked up. "That knowledge doesn't come from the outside. That's internal." Ronan straightened. Carla's pen had not moved in 4 minutes. "Who managed the Alden conduit?" Ronan said. Carla did not answer immediately, which was itself an answer. "Carla," he said. "I built the Alden structure," she said carefully. "But the monitoring schedule, the window timing, that was compartmentalized. 2 people knew the full schedule." She set her pen down with the precise placement of someone making a controlled decision. "Myself and Marcus Held." The name landed in the room like a physical object. Fiona had seen the name in the files. Held was Ronan's legal architect, not an attorney in the formal sense, but the person who designed the regulatory structure that kept the organization invisible on paper. He had been with the organization for 7 years. He was, according to everything Fiona had read, considered untouchable. The kind of person whose reliability was not questioned because questioning it would mean examining the foundation of too many things at once. "Where's Held right now?" Ronan said. Drev spoke from the door. "His office. He came in at 7. Ronan looked at Fiona. Something in the look asked a question without forming it in words. She understood what he was asking, whether she was sure, whether this was solid enough to act on. She looked at the 3 timestamps again, at the 17-hour deviation, at the architectural signature of someone operating inside a structure they understood completely. "Yes," she said. Ronan moved to the door. Drev stepped aside. "Bring him," Ronan said. "Don't tell him why." He came back into the room and stood at the window with his hands clasped behind him, and the stillness that she had learned was not calm, but the thing that lived on the other side of calm. The place a man went when he had decided something and was waiting for the logistics to arrange themselves. Fiona gathered the pages and reordered them chronologically and put them in the folder. Her hands were steady. They were still doing the thing where they didn't shake, and she was still choosing not to examine why. Marcus Held arrived 11 minutes later. He was 62, slight, with the colorless quality of a man who had made himself unremarkable as a professional strategy. Reading glasses on a chain, a cardigan that had been expensive when it was bought. He came into the East study with the expression of a man who had been interrupted during something important and was deciding how much to show his irritation. Then he saw who was in the room, and the irritation left. In its place was nothing, a deliberate nothing. The face of a man who had just understood something and had decided in real time how to handle it. He looked at Ronan, then at Carla, then at Fiona. And at Fiona, his eyes stayed a half-second longer than the others. A half-second that told her everything she needed to know about what he knew and how long he'd known it. "Marcus," Ronan said. Sit down. I'd rather stand. That wasn't a suggestion. Held sat. Ronan put the Section 11 folder on the desk and opened it without looking at it. He was looking at Held. February, March, April. The Alden conduit. Walk me through the interval change. A pause that lasted long enough to be a calculation. I'd need to look at the records. They're in front of you. Held looked at the pages. He was good. She could see that he was very good, the kind of good that came from decades of practice at presenting a specific face under pressure. But the half second at the door had already given her the measurement of him, and she watched him now with the attention of someone who knew exactly where the fault line ran. The February interval was a response to a regulatory flag, he said. There was a reporting threshold issue. Moving the transfer faster was the correct call to avoid. The February flag was cleared on the 14th, Carla said. The transfer didn't move until the 17th, 3 days after clearance. Held looked at Carla. March and April have no corresponding flags, Carla continued. Her voice was measured and surgical. I checked this morning. The room went quiet. Held looked at the table's surface. Something in his posture shifted. Not collapse, but the subtle give of a structure under weight it wasn't designed for. Marcus, Ronan said. Quiet, the dangerous kind. I'm going to ask you once. Who did you move the money for? The silence stretched out to the point where it had its own weight. You should know, Held said finally to Fiona, that she said you wouldn't figure it out. Fiona kept her face exactly where it was. She said you were soft, Held continued, that you'd been soft your whole life, and being dropped into this wouldn't change it. She said you'd panic and defer, and eventually Ronan would... He stopped, looked at Ronan. She gave me a very detailed picture of how this would go. You were not in the version she described. No, Fiona said. I imagine I wasn't. How long? Ronan said. Held looked at him. 2 years. The sound Ronan made was not loud. It was almost nothing. A breath, a compression, but it changed the temperature of the room. Carla went very still. Drev, at the door, shifted his weight with the particular adjustment of someone readying themselves for a decision. She came to me 2 years ago, Held said, with the flattened delivery of a man who had decided that honesty was now the only card worth playing. She said she was building an exit, and she needed someone who understood the financial architecture to help her move funds without triggering internal alerts. She said she would take everything she needed and leave cleanly, and that in exchange I would receive, he paused, a sum that addressed certain personal difficulties I had been managing without the organization's knowledge. What difficulties? Carla said. That's not... What difficulties, Marcus? Debt, he said flatly. Private. Significant. The kind you don't bring to this table. Ronan had not moved from the window. And you never considered that helping my wife dismantle the organization's financial infrastructure might be something I'd want to know about. She was very persuasive. I'm sure she was. Fiona watched Ronan's hands, still clasped behind him. The knuckles were white. That was new. Where is she? Ronan said. I don't know. Marcus. I genuinely don't know. She cut contact in February, after the last transfer. He looked at Fiona again, with something that was close to apology, but hadn't made it all the way. She said when she was ready, she'd resurface, that I'd know what to do when that happened. I've been waiting. And the document in the container, Fiona said, at Pier 7. Something moved across Held's face. That wasn't you, she said. That was her. She left it there to point at this room. She has a copy of the Section 11 records because you gave her access to build them in the first place, which means she has the same records we have, and she knows that if Ronan finds them and reads them the right way, they point at him. She leaned forward. She was going to let us find it. She was counting on us finding it. The whole sequence, the container, the access log, the terminal in this wing, it was designed to make Ronan start looking at his own people before he looked outside, to slow us down, to make us tear each other apart. She looked at Ronan. She wanted you to pull Held apart, she said. She wanted the organization destabilized from inside. And she wanted to see how long it took. She paused. But she miscalculated. How? Ronan said. She thought I'd panic. She thought I'd defer. Fiona looked at the clip, still on the desk between them. She left me a message designed to frighten me into making a mistake. But she's been gone for 4 years, and she built her model of me from the person I was 4 years ago. She met Ronan's eyes. I've been in this building for 72 hours. I've been reading her life for 3 days straight. She left me the most detailed intelligence package I could have asked for, and she left it because she thought I wasn't capable of using it. A long silence. Then Ronan unclenched his hands, turned fully from the window. "Drev," he said. "Held stays in the building. Find him a room he can't leave." Held stood. "Ronan, you'll be comfortable," Ronan said. "For now." He looked at Drev. "Now." Held was escorted out, the door closed. The three of them remaining in the room sat with the aftermath of it, the shape of a betrayal finally given its full dimensions. Carla picked up her pen, set it down again. "She's going to move," she said. "She'll know we've pulled Held. She'll have a signal of some kind, but a check-in he's missed." "How long before she knows?" Ronan said. "Hours," Fiona said. "Maybe less." Ronan looked at her. "Then we need to move first. We need to know where she is." "Held doesn't know." "Held doesn't know her location," Fiona said. "But he knows the financial channels she used, the specific accounts, the sequencing, the final destination of the funds she moved out." She opened section 11 again and turned to the last page. If she built a 2-year exit strategy, she didn't build just one destination. She built several. Contingency architecture, the same way she built everything else, redundant, layered, with a primary and at least 2 alternates. She turned to Carla. "I need the Alden outflow records going back 24 months. Not the summary, the raw transfer data, with destination codes." Carla was already on her phone. "And I need every property, address, or registered asset that has passed through any of the shell company names in this file," she said. "Anything with a lease, a utility account, a registered vehicle, anything that creates a physical footprint." "That's going to be, I know what it is. Start with the February through April window. That's when she was accelerating. That's when she was building toward the exit." She looked at Ronan. "She was almost ready to go when something changed. She moved the timeline up. Something spooked her or pushed her." "What?" "I don't know yet." She picked up the folder. "Give me 2 hours and Carla's records and I'll know." She spent those 2 hours at the desk in the East Study with the raw transfer data spread across every available surface, and her mind in the narrow, absolute focus that 11 years of reading financial documents had built in her without her ever having asked for it. Carla sat across from her and answered questions in single sentences, and occasionally made calls in a low voice, and the room outside the window went from gray morning to flat overcast noon, and neither of them acknowledged it. At the 90-minute mark, Fiona found it. A property registration through a 4th-tier shell she hadn't seen in the main documents. A company called Renwick Holdings that appeared in one transfer record as the final destination of a sum moved in the last week of April. The registration was for a warehouse unit on the south waterfront 8 miles from the Blackwood estate. Filed under a name that meant nothing. Helena Cross. Helena. A variant. An alias so close to the original that it was almost lazy, which meant it was confident. The alias of someone who believed she would never need to actually hide, because no one who knew her would be looking at this level of detail. Fiona picked up the pen Carla had left on the desk and circled the address. She took it to Ronan. He read it, looked up at her. "You're sure?" "No," she said, "but it's the best thing we have." He looked at the address for another moment. Then he handed it to Drev, who had reappeared at some point in the last hour with the particular quality of a man who was always where the decision was being made. "Reconnoiter only," Ronan said. 2 people. No approach, no contact, no communication from the site. I want eyes and a perimeter count. Drev left. They waited. Fiona sat in the chair by the window and looked at the grounds and thought about Fallon. Not the woman in the documents, not the operational profile built from 3 years of recorded decisions, but the girl in the photograph, 11 years old and grinning in summer light with her arm around a sister she would eventually turn into a tool. She tried to find anger in that and found it, but found something else underneath it that was harder to name. something that was not forgiveness, nowhere close to that, but was adjacent to grief. The grief of a person who had once shared a face and a house and a kitchen table with someone who had decided, at some point, that none of that was worth anything against whatever she was building instead. Her phone, Fallon's phone, which Ronan had placed in the East Wing room on the first day, buzzed. She looked at the screen. Unknown number. 2 words in the message field. Nice work. She stared at it. The phone buzzed again. You found Marcus faster than I'd planned for. That part, I'll admit. She stood up, crossed to Ronan in 4 steps and put the phone in his hand. He read both messages. His jaw tightened once and then released. He handed the phone back. She's watching the building, Fiona said. Or someone inside is still… No, Fiona said. Held was the one. She's telling us she knows we found him because she can see the building. She's close enough to watch the traffic. Who comes in, who leaves, what vehicles move and when. She looked at Ronan. She's not at the warehouse. A beat. She baited us, he said. She tested us. The warehouse might be real, might be an actual asset, but she's not there. She wanted to see if we'd found Held, and she wanted to see how fast we moved and where we moved. Fiona looked at this phone. She's recalibrating. The phone buzzed a 3rd time. Pier 42, tonight. Bring her. Don't bring an army. F. Ronan read it. Set the phone on the desk with the careful placement of a man choosing not to throw it. Pier 42. She knew the pier from Fallon's files, a semi-decommissioned cargo facility at the south end of the waterfront, privately owned through a holding company, used intermittently for storage, large enough to be opaque, remote enough to limit witnesses. She's setting the terms, Carla said from the doorway. Yes, Ronan said, which means she thinks she controls the outcome. She usually does, Fiona said. Ronan looked at her. Do we go? It was not the question she had expected. She had expected him to be already decided, already moving, already building the tactical response, already treating her as one component in a machinery he controlled. The question meant something different. The question meant he was, in some specific and bounded way, asking her. She looked at the message on the screen, at Fallon's initial. We go, she said, but not the way she planned it. The afternoon was spent in the East Study with the door locked and 3 people and 1 question. How do you walk into a trap that knows you're coming and come out the other side of it? Ronan planned in the way she had started to recognize. Quiet, complete, with a patience for detail that matched her own. Carla mapped the financial contingencies, the assets Fallon might still be able to access, the leverage points that could be closed before nightfall. Fiona rebuilt the psychological architecture of her sister's plan from everything she had read and everything the messages told her in the specific, intimate knowledge of a person whose face she wore. At 9:15, Ronan's car pulled out of the estate. 2 people, as requested. The drive to Pier 42 took 22 minutes. The rain had come back. Not the brutal sideways rain of the first night, but a steady, patient rain that blurred the city lights into smears and made the waterfront look like something out of a fever. The pier materialized from the dark slowly, its structures resolving from the general gray into specifics. A rusted gate, standing open, 2 floodlights illuminating a concrete apron, a building beyond that, a long warehouse shape with light leaking from its far end. Ronan put the car in park and looked at the gate. She has people in the building, he said. Yes. And at least 1 position outside, high ground, probably the crane structure at the north end. Yes. And she knows we know this because she knows how I work. Yes, Fiona said. And she knows you well enough to know you came with backup you haven't told me about, and she's planned for that too. A silence. She felt him look at her but didn't look back. She knows you, he said. She knows you, Fiona said. She lived with you for 3 years. She built the model. She looked at the lit end of the warehouse. But she built the model of this situation around me panicking and around you reacting. Neither of us has done what she expected. She put her hand on the door. So we're already outside her architecture, which means the only variable she can't account for is you, he said. She pushed the door open. The rain hit her face and the smell of salt water and diesel came in, and she stood and looked at the lit end of the building and thought about 11 years old and summer sun and a kitchen table with 4 quarters at the corners. "Let me go in first," she said. "No." "Ronan, no." "She sent for me," Fiona said. "Not for you. If you walk in there first, she pulls whatever trigger she has prepared for that scenario, and this ends badly for everyone. If I walk in first," she turned to look at him, she hesitates, because she doesn't actually know, yet, what I've become. She built a model of me from a woman who was afraid. She needs to update her model before she can act, and that hesitation is the only window we're going to get. He looked at her for a long moment in the rain. 30 seconds, he said. "Then I'm behind you." She walked toward the gate. The concrete apron was wet, and her footsteps were loud, and the floodlights turned her into a shadow stretching behind her as she moved toward the warehouse door. She felt the crane structure above and to her left and did not look at it because looking at it would tell whoever was up there that she knew they were there. She walked with Fallon's posture. She had it now, the specific weight distribution, the particular set of the shoulders, and she breathed through her nose, and her heart was doing something she could feel in her wrists and her throat, and she kept walking. The warehouse door was metal, standing 3 inches open. Orange light from inside. She pushed it open. The interior was cold and vast and smelled of seawater and old oil. Crates stacked to 20 feet along both walls. The clear space in the center lit by 2 standing work lights that created a harsh, shadowless circle. In the center of the circle, Fallon Hale stood with her hands in the pockets of a dark coat and looked at Fiona across 40 feet of concrete with an expression that was almost a smile. They were identical. Of course they were. But standing here looking at her across the lit circle, Fiona understood something that 3 days of reading documents had not been able to fully articulate. They were not the same. The face was the same. The bones were the same. But the woman across the circle had spent 4 years building something that required her to hollow out everything soft and replace it with architecture, and it showed in ways that were subtle and absolute. Fallon looked at her for a long moment. "You look like me," she said. "I know." "Better than I thought you would." She tilted her head. "You're wearing it right." "Took practice." "I'm sure." Fallon's eyes moved past her to the door. "He's outside." "Yes." "And he sent you in first." "I asked to come in first." A pause. Something shifted in Fallon's expression. Fractional. The kind of shift that was only visible to someone who had spent their whole life reading an identical face. "Why?" she said. "Because you planned for him. You didn't plan for me." Fiona took 3 steps forward, closing the distance to 30 feet. "You planned for the version of me you remembered, the one who would come in here scared and uncertain and looking for a way out." She stopped. "That version of me is gone." Fallon looked at her with the careful attention of someone recalibrating. "You put me in here," Fiona said. "You put me in that building, in your clothes, in your life, with the people you frightened and the empire you built and then burned on your way out the door. You handed me everything you'd learned about how to survive this world, and you did it because you thought I couldn't use it." She kept her voice level. "But here's what you didn't account for, Fallon. You didn't account for the fact that I'm better at reading numbers than you are. You didn't account for Held's signature in the February transfers. And you didn't account for the possibility that spending 3 days inside your life would teach me more about you than it taught me about the woman you wanted me to pretend to be." Fallon was very still. "The warehouse on the south waterfront," Fiona said. "Renwick Holdings." Helena Cross. She watched her twin's face. "You want to tell me what else you have in this city under that name, or do you want me to keep going?" And in the silence that followed, behind the work lights and the rain sound and the distant structure of a plan that was ceasing to operate as designed, something moved in Fallon Hale's eyes that Fiona had not seen there in 20 years. Something that was not quite fear and not quite respect, but was built from both of. The silence in the warehouse had a texture to it, the particular density of a moment that knows it is the last of its kind. Fallon's hands had come out of her pockets. That was the first thing Fiona noticed. Not reaching for anything, not signaling to anyone in the dark above them, just out, hanging at her sides, which was the body's admission that the architecture of the plan had developed a fracture and the hands didn't know yet what to do about it. Fiona stood at the edge of the work-light circle and waited. "Helena Cross," Fallon said. Not a question, not a confirmation either, just the name held up between them like something retrieved from water. "3 properties," Fiona said. "The warehouse, a loft on Carver Street registered 6 months ago, and a boat slip at the Marina Vance facility under a corporate lease that goes back 11 months. She kept her voice even. "You've been in this city the whole time. You never left." Something moved across Fallon's face. Pride, maybe. The specific pride of a person who has done a difficult thing well and finds no pleasure in having it seen. "The boat was the exit," Fiona said. "If everything went wrong, you had a way out that didn't require roads or airports or anyone else's cooperation." She paused. "You built the whole plan around being able to disappear in 4 hours if you had to." "And yet here I am," Fallon said. "Here you are." A beat. The rain on the warehouse roof was a low, constant presence. Somewhere above them, in the structural dark beyond the work lights, Fiona was aware of at least 2 positions. People Fallon had placed, people who were very still right now, waiting on a signal that wasn't coming. "You should know," Fallon said, "that if I raise my left hand, the 2 people on the catwalk become a problem." "I know." "And you came in anyway." "I came in anyway." Fallon studied her across the 30 feet of concrete. She had always been the one who studied. Even at 12, even at 8, in every room they had ever shared, she had been the one who took the full measure of everything before she committed to anything. It had looked like shyness when they were children. It wasn't shyness. It was the thoroughness of a person who never wanted to be caught without information. "You're different," Fallon said. "Yes." 3 days. Not accusation, almost something else. "It took you 3 days." "You built a good file," Fiona said. "Thorough, detailed. You kept records of everything you learned, every negotiation, every tactic, every outcome." She looked at her twin. "You're a good teacher, Fallon. You just didn't know you were teaching me." The door behind Fiona opened. She didn't turn. She knew the footstep. Fallon's eyes moved to the door and back. "Just him?" "Just him," Ronan said from behind Fiona's left shoulder. His voice was even, and it filled the warehouse the way his voice always filled rooms. Not loudly, but completely, with the quality of something that displaced the air it entered. Fallon looked at him for the first time. And in that look, compressed into 3 seconds, Fiona saw 4 years of architecture and planning and deliberate severance. And underneath it, pressed flat by everything she'd built on top of it, something that was neither love nor its absence, but the specific exhaustion of a person who had spent years trying to stop feeling a thing and had not entirely succeeded. "Ronan," Fallon said. "Fallon." His voice gave nothing. She looked at him for another moment and then looked at Fiona, and the look she gave her sister was more complicated than anything in the file. More complicated than any document could have held. It was the look of someone who had made a calculation a long time ago and was only now, standing in the concrete and the orange light and the rain sound, adding up what it had actually cost. "The catwalk," she said to the dark above. "Stand down. Leave the building." Silence. Then the soft sounds of movement, the creak of the structure, the distant click of a door. They were alone. Fallon looked at Ronan. "Marcus?" "Found him this morning," Ronan said. "He's alive. For now." "He was useful to me and useless to himself," she said. "His debts were real. I didn't manufacture them. I found them." She looked at Fiona. "That's how it works. You find what's already broken and you apply pressure to the fracture." A pause. "You know that now." "I know a lot of things now," Fiona said. Fallon walked slowly to one of the crates at the edge of the lit circle and sat on it. Not the movement of someone who was giving up, but of someone who was exhausted by a particular performance and had decided to stop performing it. She sat with her elbows on her knees and her hands loosely clasped, and she looked at the floor for a moment. "How much does he know?" she said, quietly, to Fiona, as though Ronan weren't standing 8 feet away. "He knows about the Section 11 structure," Fiona said. "He knows about the third-party conduit and Held's involvement. He knows about the transfer timing. She paused. He knows you built the exit plan from inside the organization. The frame, Fallon said. Yes. Fallon looked up, not at Fiona, at Ronan. The Section 11 records. The architecture I built around the Alden conduit. You understand what it looks like. It looks like I moved the money, Ronan said. It looks exactly like you moved the money. To 3 specific accounts that are connected, if you follow the chain far enough, to 2 federal investigations that have been opened since last year. She held his eyes. I didn't create the investigations. They existed. I just built a road between your name and their interest. The silence that followed had the quality of something that could go in any direction. Why are you telling me this? Ronan said. Because she already found the frame, Fallon said. She looked at Fiona. Didn't you? Fiona thought about the Section 11 records, about the sequencing irregularity, about the things she had seen that she had told Ronan was a third-party signature, which it was, but which was also, in its specific architecture, a pointer, a designed pointer, built to be found by someone who knew what to look for, built to be found by her. You knew I'd read the file, Fiona said slowly. Fallon's expression did something that was almost but not quite a smile. I left you the file. I left you everything you needed to find what I built. She looked at her hands. Because I need the frame dismantled, and I can't do it from the outside. And the only person in that building who could do it from the inside. She stopped, looked up. Is someone who reads numbers better than I do. The warehouse was very quiet. You needed me to find it so I could undo it, Fiona said. The federal connection is the problem. If Ronan goes down on a financial fraud charge built from architecture I created, the organization collapses, which creates the kind of visibility that burns everything in a 2-mile radius, including the money I took, including the people I used to take it. She looked at Ronan. Including Marcus, who knows enough about how I work to make things difficult for everyone if he finds himself in a room with federal investigators and no other options. You came here to offer a deal, Ronan said. I came here because your wife, she looked at Fiona, your actual wife apparently, in the way that matters, got further in 3 days than I thought was possible, and I'd rather have this conversation directly than keep placing coins in shipping containers. She exhaled. I came here because I'm tired. The admission landed in the room with a quietness that was different from everything else that had been said. Not tactical, not designed. Fiona looked at her twin sitting on the crate in the orange light, and for the first time since the alley behind Kersley's diner, she felt the grief she had been keeping compressed behind the operational necessity of the last 3 days begin to move. She let it move. She did not let it out. The deal, she said. Fallon looked at Ronan. I returned 2.8 of the 3.2. The remainder covers what it cost me to build the exit. She let him absorb that number. In exchange, Marcus stays inside and stays quiet. The Section 11 records go away, completely, including any copies I hold. And the federal road I built gets dismantled, which your accountant, she glanced at Fiona, can do if she has access to the Alden conduit documentation in 3 days. 3 days, Fiona said. Less if you're fast. The ghost of something crossed Fallon's face. You're fast. Ronan had not moved from the position he'd taken at the edge of the light. He was looking at Fallon with an expression that Fiona couldn't fully read. Not rage, not relief, not warmth. The specific expression of a man who is updating a model he had believed was complete. And you, he said, after. After I'm gone, Fallon said. Permanently. No more coins in containers, no more messages, no more testing the perimeter. She looked at her hands again. I was good at being in your world. I was not good at being in your life. Those are different skills, and I spent 3 years confusing them. She stood up from the crate. We both know what we had, and what it was, and what it wasn't. I'm not interested in relitigating it. No, Ronan said. You're interested in surviving it. Yes, she said without apology. I am. He looked at her for a long time. Then he looked at Fiona. And the look he gave her was a question that was also an answer. that was asking her what she thought and simultaneously telling her that what she thought mattered, which 3 days ago would have been unimaginable. Fiona looked at Fallon, at the face that was hers, worn differently, with a different history pressed into the lines of it. "The documentation," she said. "Everything related to the Alden conduit. The shell company formation records, the transfer authorizations, the account access logs. All of it. I'll have it to you by morning. And the federal connection. The specific path you built. I need the design documentation, not just the surface records. I need to see how you built it to take it apart." Fallon looked at her steadily. "That's detailed work. I know what it is. It'll expose the full architecture. You'll see everything." "I already see everything," Fiona said. "I've been reading your life for 3 days. There's nothing in those records that will surprise me." Something in Fallon's face shifted. Not softened, not quite, but changed in a way that was specific and private and not intended for Ronan. The change of a person who has found, in an unexpected place, something that is close to being known. "All right," she said. Ronan made a sound that was not quite agreement and not quite anything else. "Held is your problem," Fallon said. "I'll provide documentation of his arrangement with me, which makes him a confirmed liability and gives you a clean reason for whatever you decide. I won't interfere with that." "You're giving him to me." "I'm giving you the paperwork. What you do with him is up to you." She met his eyes without flinching. "I didn't want to use him. He was available and I was building something, and available is what you use." "And her," Ronan said, and the word was tilted toward Fiona without looking at her. Fallon looked at her sister for a long moment. "I knew it would work. I knew you'd be convincing enough to buy me time. I knew Ronan's people would find the wrong twin and bring her in." She paused. "I told myself the rest was your problem to navigate." "It was," Fiona said. "Yes." Fallon's voice was even. "It was. And you navigated it." She picked up something from the crate beside her, a manila envelope, thick, that she held out toward Fiona. "This is everything. The conduit design, the federal thread, the account documentation. Everything you need to dismantle it." Fiona crossed the circle and took the envelope. They were 2 feet apart, which was the closest they had been in 4 years, and at this distance she could see that Fallon looked exactly as tired as she had sounded. The specific tiredness of a person who had been building and running and maintaining a complex system alone for too long. She looked at her twin's face. "You kept the clip for 20 years, she said. Fallon blinked, the only involuntary thing Fiona had seen from her. "The butterfly clip," Fiona said. "The one I dropped when we were kids. You kept it." A silence. "I kept a lot of things," Fallon said. "You left it on my threshold. I needed you to know I'd been there." "That's not the only reason," Fiona said. Fallon looked at her for a moment, and whatever lived behind her eyes in that moment was not operational and not designed and not anything that would appear in a file. It was old and it was private, and it lasted approximately 3 seconds before she put it away. "No," she said quietly. "Not the only reason." She stepped back. She was very good at stepping back. She had the movement of someone who had practiced leaving. "Ronan," she said. It was a farewell and an acknowledgement and nothing else. She did not try to make it more. "Fallon," he said. She walked to the far door. Not the one Fiona and Ronan had come through. Her own exit, planned and positioned. Of course. She pushed it open and the rain came in, and she paused at the threshold without turning. "You're good at this," she said to Fiona. "Better than I expected. Better, maybe, than me." A beat. "Don't let that become the only thing you're good at." Then she walked out into the rain, and the door swung closed behind her, and she was gone. The warehouse settled back into its own silence. Rain on the roof. The work lights humming. Ronan stood where he had been the entire time, and for a moment neither of them spoke. "She'll honor it," he said finally. Not a question. "Yes," Fiona said. "Not because of loyalty, because the deal is the best outcome available to her, and she knows it." She looked at the door Fallon had left through. "She's very practical." "She is." He was quiet for a moment. "The dismantling, the federal thread. 3 days, you said." If I have the documentation and access to the conduit records. Yes. He nodded once. You'll have both. She looked at the envelope in her hands, at the clean edges of it, the careful sealing, Fallon's preparation, meticulous to the end. After, she said. When it's done. Ronan looked at her. You said you'd offer me a choice, she said. When things were stable, leave and disappear or stay. I said that. I'm holding you to it. He looked at her steadily. All right. But I'm not ready to answer it yet, she said. I need to not be in the middle of this first. I need to finish the work, and then I need to sit somewhere quiet and figure out who I am on the other side of it. He was very still for a moment. Then, the library. When you're done. I'll be there. She nodded. They walked out into the rain together, not side by side exactly, but close enough that the distance between them was a chosen thing, specific, negotiated, not yet named. The next 3 days were the quietest work of Fiona Hale's life, which was strange given what the work was. She sat at the desk in the East study with Fallon's documentation spread in front of her and the Alden conduit records open beside it, and she traced the architecture her sister had built, and then, with the methodical patience of someone who understood structures from the inside, she took it apart. Carla assisted. They did not talk much, which was its own kind of progress. The ability to work in the same room without negotiating the air. On the second day, Carla brought coffee without being asked and set it at Fiona's elbow and said nothing. And Fiona said nothing back, and that was the closest they came to something that was not adversarial. Marcus Held remained in the building. He did not cause problems. He was practical too in the end, the practically of a man who understands he is in the only position available to him and is making the best of it. He provided supplemental documentation when Fiona needed it. He answered questions in writing, submitted through Drev. He did not ask about his future. On the third day, Fiona closed the last folder. The federal thread was gone. The road Fallon had built between Ronan's name and the investigations was dismantled at every junction. The architecture collapsed inward without visible footprint. The accounts closed or transferred. The shell company connections severed in the sequence required to make the severance look organic. It was, she thought, the most complex accounting work she had ever done. It was also, she thought, the most illegal. She put that in a box and acknowledged it and did not pretend it wasn't there. She went to the library. Ronan was there. He had been, she suspected, checking periodically whether she had arrived, which was the kind of thing he would do and not say. He was at the desk when she came in, and he looked up, and what passed between them in the first second was something that didn't have language yet, but was moving toward one. She sat in the chair across from him. The fireplace was lit this time. A real fire, not the empty grate of her first night. It's done, she said. I know. Carla told me an hour ago. He set down what he was holding. How much of what you built will hold? All of it, if no one goes looking from the inside. She looked at the fire. The weak point is the February accounts. I had to reroute through a conduit we'd closed, which means there's a gap in the chain if anyone checks the dates carefully. Will they? Not unless they have reason to. And the people who had reason to are no longer looking at this organization. He nodded. Marcus, she said, he'll leave. Today. A settlement that buys his silence without being large enough to look like a payment. He paused. He understands the terms. And Decker's replacement. Carla is handling it. She looked at him. He looked at her. The fire between them was the loudest thing in the room. The 2.8, she said. Fallon's transfer. Did it come? This morning. He leaned back slightly. She was thorough, correct down to the decimal. She would be. He was quiet for a moment. She was right about one thing. Fiona waited. You are better at this than she was, he said. Not at the part she was built for, but at the parts that matter more. He said it without inflection, the way he said everything, not to be kind, not to be cruel, because it was accurate. She was good at operating in this world. You're good at understanding it. Those are different skills. She said something like that, Fiona said. In the warehouse. I know, I heard it. The fire moved. Outside the library window, the afternoon light was thin and even, and the grounds of the estate were washed clean from 4 days of rain, everything standing in the particular sharpness that came after sustained weather. Fiona looked at the room, the walls of books, the desk, the chair where she had sat the first night with Fallon's file spread across her lap and her hands not yet steady. She thought about the woman who had built a life here and found it insufficient and left it for a version of freedom that had turned out to be its own kind of cage. She thought about herself sitting in a parking structure in her damp work clothes, thinking about peanut butter crackers. She thought about all the things that were now true about her that had not been true a week ago, and she tried to decide how she felt about the woman she had become in the interval, and she found that she couldn't yet. She found that it was too close and too large and would need distance and time before it resolved into something she could name. "I don't know who I am right now," she said. Not to him specifically, to the room, to the fire. "No," he said. "I'd expect not." "That doesn't worry you." "It would worry me more if you claimed otherwise." She looked at him. His face in the firelight was not softer exactly. He was not a man who softened, but it was less defended. The particular glass wall he kept between himself and the room was not in place, or was thinner than usual, and through it she could see something that she thought was the same quality of exhaustion she had seen in Fallon's face at the warehouse. The tiredness of a person who has been maintaining a structure for a long time and is considering, for the first time, what it would mean to stop. "The choice," she said. He waited. "I'm not ready to make it." "I know. But I'm not leaving today." He held her eyes. "All right. I'm going to need something that is mine in this building," she said. "Not Fallon's clothes, not Fallon's file, not Fallon's role. Something that belongs to me and not to the performance I've been giving." "What do you need?" She thought about it. "An office, with a door I can lock, and my own clothes, which means someone needs to go to Unit 4C at the Corbin Apartments and bring me what's there." The corner of his mouth moved, the smallest movement. "I'll send someone today. And I want to speak to Carla, directly, not through work, about what she lost when Fallon left and what she actually needs from whoever is in this role going forward. Carla will appreciate that more than she'll show." "I know." Fiona looked at the fire. "She's been carrying a lot of this alone." "Yes." A silence settled that was different from the silences of the past 4 days. Not tactical, not pressurized, not loaded with the specific weight of what hadn't yet been said. A quieter thing. The silence of two people sitting in a room after the storm has passed and the work is done, figuring out what the landscape looks like now. Fiona reached into her jacket pocket and set the butterfly clip on the desk between them. The pale blue enamel, the worn wing. "She left this for me," she said. "The first night. On the threshold." Ronan looked at it. "I don't know what to do with it," she said. "I don't know if I want to keep it or put it somewhere, or I just know I don't want to carry it anymore. In my pocket, like that." He looked at it for a moment and then, without comment, opened the top drawer of the desk and placed it inside. Closed the drawer. It was a small thing. It was the right thing. She exhaled. Outside the window, the thin afternoon light moved across the grounds in the way light moved in late autumn, horizontal, attentive, aware of how little time it had before the dark. The iron gate was visible from here, and the cameras, and the clean lines of the estate perimeter, and beyond them the city that didn't know any of this had happened, that was going about its business in the rain and the cold, 11 floors and a parking structure away from the alley where a woman had been taken on a night that had split her life cleanly in two before and after. Fiona sat in the library of the Blackwood estate and looked at the fire and understood, in the settling quiet of the moment, that she was not the same person she had been in that alley. That 3 days of wearing another woman's life had changed the shape of her, had built things in her that hadn't existed and dismantled things that had seemed permanent, and that she was going to have to live with that the way you lived with anything irreversible, not by pretending it was reversible, but by deciding what you built from the fact of it. She did not know yet what she was going to build, but she was sitting in the library, and the fire was lit, and the work was done, and the man across the desk was waiting, not commanding, not maneuvering, just waiting. And that was for today enough. She picked up the folder that was sitting at the edge of the desk. Empty. The records removed and processed and resolved. She set it back down. Tomorrow, she said. Tomorrow, he agreed. The fire settled. The light outside moved. Somewhere in the city, in a life she had not yet decided to return to or leave behind, a cracked mug sat on a desk on the 14th floor of the Kessler building, and the vending machine on the 3rd floor either had the peanut butter crackers or it didn't. Fiona Hale sat in the warmth and the quiet, and did not decide anything yet. And for the first time since the rain in the alley and the hand across her mouth, that felt like exactly the right thing to do.